Make it plain.
Make it plain.
M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
God bless you. Get woke. Folks, MIP is now COVID-free, meaning free to all subscribers as we navigate this pandemic. We're thinking about everyone, and we've got to get through this together. So for a limited time, no fee to subscribe to Make It Plain on your favorite podcast app. Ladies and gentlemen, the member of Congress that I am most in touch with these days and working most closely with is our guest. And I'll tell you up front, the reason for that is we are at several historical moments, but one historical moment is the issue of reparations in H.R. 40. We expect in the not too distant future, maybe even before November 3rd, but definitely before the end of 2020, there will be a vote on H.R. 40 in the House. There are almost 150 co-sponsors, and my guest has taken the baton. The baton was passed to her from the Honorable John Conyers, who introduced that bill for 40 years at least, I believe. And she has taken that baton, and we have been working more tirelessly than ever, getting co-sponsors, getting groups, getting everyone involved. And so she and I are working together very, very closely on that, and I am at her service. But she is I would say, a legacy member of the Congressional Black Caucus. And she has been a member of the Congressional Black Caucus for years and has always championed her community back home in Texas. We want to talk about the historic moment of an African-American woman on the ticket, the Democratic nominee for vice president. That will be Kamala Harris. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee joins us here once again on Make It Plain. Congresswoman, how are you?
Well, if it is a question of whether or not I think that the battle is still afoot, then I'm on the battlefield because there is so much going on in our life and our lives today, Reverend, that it is important to not cease. And I am unceasing. Sometimes you get tired, but what I would say is that only in certain instances do I claim Fannie Lou Hamer and say I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And it is in the vein of her message, which was she's not tired, but she's sick and tired of being sick and tired of injustices. And so I would say that we have a moment in history to get all of the pieces together. The momentum of this great nomination, the movement of Black Lives Matter and Black Lives Movement, the combination of over 200 civil rights organizations that have come together to help us under H.R. 40, the Commission to Study and Develop Reparation Proposals, the families who are demanding justice around Ahmaud Arbery, Brother Brooks, Tamir Rice, who, by the way, has not yet received an investigation by the Justice Department. His incident, his tragic murder was in 2014. Remind everybody, he was a 12-year-old that had a BB gun, 12-year-old. Of course, Breonna Taylor, that we are grateful for Oprah Winfrey's and other influencers' voices to be heard. Billboards are now all over the city to be able to emphasize that justice has not yet been done. And then, of course, my beloved constituent, who, of course, lived in Ilhan Omar's district, beloved constituent George Floyd, his family grew up in CUNY Homes and Jack Yates High School. Just a few days ago, those who played football with George, Big Floyd, did a marvelous thing, set up a goal of empowerment for young people, getting people out to vote in his name. Of course, he played football and basketball. You know, you never know I wonder would any of that have mattered to the officer who, with reckless abandonment, intent, and maliciousness, just decided to kill him on that day. So until we render justice and until we continue to have voices that are not mine, meaning they don't come from my heritage, and truly when America rises up to what the founding fathers, although they were imperfect, the language they wrote was perfect language because it said that they have organized to create a more perfect union from what they came from, where they were discriminated against on the basis of religion, and that their rights, even under European rule, their rights were much limited. In fact, discrimination was rampant in Europe. It was a caste system, or it was a system, economic system. You were in or you were out. And they wanted to come to a place where we could have opportunities. So we are still fighting for that. And as a senior member of the Judiciary Committee, Reverend, that is something I constantly do. I'm fighting here in the district. I just want to end by saying, we are still a hot spot in Texas, along with California and Florida. In the last 24 hours, Florida had the most deadliest day. We still are upwards of 20% positive rate here in the state of Texas. California, I think, went to 600,000 cases. We're in the nation approaching 6 million cases and approaching 170,000 dead. I think it's about 168,000. Every time I say that number, chills run up my spine, and primarily because the family of Americans, they said there's probably not one American because of the numbers, and we don't understand the magnitude of these numbers, that can say they've not been impacted by COVID-19 in some way. But just think of the families and extended families of the 168,000. I mean, you can include relatives and immediate family, but you include co-workers and neighbors who this person meant something to. And I don't know how the government, the administration, the White House can even sleep at night when we have this high numbers. And of course, the Congressional Black Caucus, and I participated with that on the Health Task Force to focus on waking the government up about the harsh impact on Black people, on African Americans, and then Latinx, both in terms of infection and in terms of deaths. So we're still working.
Of course. How do you feel about this ticket? How does it feel to have a Black woman finally on a major party ticket?
Well, I've spoken this week, and I think I will say a little bit of how I characterize it this week. First of all, I think people should know the history of Black women. Of course, in this horrific history of ours that we are trying to correct, to establish a new pathway, the traders stopped trading gold and spice to trade slaves. And slaves became the economic engine of this nation and Europe. But in the course of that structure, the woman was the binding force of making a family. Obviously, there was no respect for slave families. There was no respect for us when the Constitution was written. We were not even counted as a person. But if you look at the narratives, you can see slave women holding on to children, holding on to little boys, trying to make sure that they were not separated, taking care of home when they sold the daddy or the husband or the brother or the mainstay of the family or the grandfather or the matriarch, the patriarch rather. That woman became that holder of the burden, the translator of the legacy. I remember one narrative where the slave woman sent a message to her husband, "Don't come, they're selling us. I'm trying to keep them from selling a 13-year-old boy and taking her daughter." I don't know if people know the brutality of slavery, but the woman felt the burden because obviously we are tending to be the glue of a family. We have given birth to these children. They are our family. They're not slaves to us. And so I think what has happened with this unique selection, but certainly not without a basis, meaning Black women have been experienced and competent and ready to do this for centuries, if you will. But in any event, it is an affirmation of Black women counting, and Black women's genius, and Black women's experience, and Black women's burden. Because our burden didn't end with slavery. It traveled all the way through in the broken 1887 compromise, the lynching of 4,000, including women, the horrors of Jim Crowism, and the life of discrimination in the 20th century that included economic and social and health and educational, if you will, discrimination. Black women kept families together. Black women sent boys off to war. Black women sent, during mass incarceration, young men off to prison. Black women held families together. Black women became educated. They became astronauts, business women, doctors, professors, boxers, Olympians. Unbelievable. And we have never been president or never been a vice president. Senator Harris, who comes with her own genius, her own expertise, her own oneness, standing with her sister and her family in Oakland, California, integrating schools, being the first district attorney in San Francisco, the first attorney general, happened to be an African-American woman, Southeastern heritage, Southeastern Asian heritage, and someone who had run a statewide race and won, and as well presided over a $700 million budget, 4,800 staff, joined a unity ticket of a man that respects her and says, I want everybody to hear this. Sheila Jackson Lee didn't say it. Joe Biden said it to his vice presidential pick. I want you to be the last voice in the room, so that her status is no less than the status he had with President Barack Obama, and probably more than the status of many VPs through the ages. So my point that I made earlier this week was that my friend Kamala Harris went to the mountaintop and she took Black women with her. And I believe that we are moving forward for the greater good.
Amen. Isn't it interesting? Don't you find it interesting that, and again, you and I work together every day in the reparations movement. Don't you find it interesting that the detractors within our movement, those who say that the vestiges don't matter and we should only think of those who can prove a direct lineage from slavery in America, are the same people. There's some overlap between them and the people who say Kamala's not really an African-American woman because she's from Jamaica. So don't you find that interesting? And isn't this an opportunity to kill a couple of birds with one stone?
Well, let me just say this. My focus is, of course, on the passage of H.R. 40. In the language of that document, the four corners of that document is an appropriate apology and acknowledgement of the burden of slavery on Black people. And then it goes on to say it was a government action. And so let me say that Senator Harris is a Black American. She is an American born in Oakland, California, and she is the perfect example of the legacy of slavery wherever it might have been. But more importantly, she is an example of someone treated with discrimination because of the color of her skin, And because of her being called and categorized in this nation as a Black person, a Black American, and of course, I always say and remind people of her Southeast Asian heritage as she does. But it is important to note that here she has been described and has taken the position that she stands as a Black woman. Who am I to in any way counter that? And so we have a Black woman on the ticket. We look forward to legislation that deals with the treatment of Black people, and we will stand without fear of anyone that even tries to describe and use any words like anchor or non-citizen, and be able to, with legal arguments, profoundly say that she is everything that we had hoped and dreamed for. She is a Black woman proud of her heritage, and I must say, a proud graduate of Howard University. Now you go, girl, and as well, all the HBCUs, I don't want to see one of them skipping past voting, and I want them to bring 10 HBCUers and Thurgood Marshall schools, those are the state Black schools, with them.
Amen.
That's a lot of power.
Amen. And she's a Divine Nine, a member of the Divine Nine.
She's a member there.
That's right. And I just learned, I didn't realize that she's a link. That's a whole other army.
The armies are far and wide.
Yes.
And it is based upon our membership that we are saying that the membership, they don't have to work and worry about the organizations because they stand separate, as you well know, as 501c3s. As a lawyer, I have to say that.
Amen.
So the membership,
that's right,
is free. As far as I know, we're still fighting for freedom, but you're free to do as you desire in selecting your presidential team, Biden and Harris, and to get out and vote.
Amen. The Democratic National Convention taking place with the ticket, with the first ever virtual convention. Are you feeling confident? Do you feel confident about winning the White House and, for that matter, the Senate? I think we're pretty certain to hold the House, but you feeling confident about the White House and the Senate?
I'm feeling confident of the two people that will head our ticket. I don't think we could have gotten in this era, in this time, a better combination of a man that has entrenched himself in working class values, that calls himself Joe, talks about his dad and his family members who had hard times themselves, experiencing personal crisis and tragedy in his own life, having a woman of great status, Dr. Jill, stand along his side, and then, of course, to select a Black woman who has had her own travails, recently losing her mother in the last years to the horrors of cancer, having her sister by her side, feeling the pain that women feel as it relates to being heads of households and trying to make ends meet in her legislative career. She's worked on these issues of empowering women. So we have a ticket that is up to us. And this convention, I believe, they will be shocked. It is probably going to be the most widely participated convention. We won't have thousands, we'll have millions, because people are wanting a direct change. They want a seismic movement. They want to do what John Robert Lewis told us to do in his op-ed that came out on the day of his funeral. He wants, as he said, that he is hopeful. And so this convention is going to be full of hope that we're going to build back better. And if you don't want to miss being part of that energy and that commitment, you need to be one of those that'll say millions came on this convention, making a commitment wherever they are to get out the vote legally, to vote legally. Because for some reason, it seems that when we have diverse groups and we're empowering women, and empowering young people, all of a sudden there's something illegal about it. The only thing illegal that I'm facing is voter suppression by those who don't want us to vote. Voter suppression by this administration who is, in essence, imploding the Postal Service. Reverend, were you aware, and you got those pictures as I did, of picking up post office boxes in Portland, Oregon, putting them on a truck?
Yep. Yep.
Outrageous. No one gives an explanation. All of a sudden, putting on postal boxes, and I think Oregon has been voting by mail for years.
Mm-hmm.
So I am confident that we can get to the finish line if we work like we've never worked before. If we register to vote, most jurisdictions, the registration period is still on. Some states even have same-day registration, I believe. And so we should not let up until the last vote is counted. We will have mail ballots, we'll have absentee ballots in some jurisdictions, and we will have early voting. And yes, there will be people who vote on election day. Our job is to make sure that each aspect of voting is done legally, and that we push back like we've never done before against the oppressive actions that are coming toward this campaign, and that the Department of Justice be held accountable if their Civil Rights Division doesn't stand on the side of people, that when they call for real voting infractions being denied to vote, that the Civil Rights Division wakes up and does it. Frankly, I believe that division needs an entire overhaul, but they can't take a check like they're doing of taxpayer dollars and not rise to the occasion of providing the kind of counsel and coverage to states that are saying their voters are being denied. Their machines are broken. They don't have workers. The doors are closing in the voting place. All of that has to be reviewed and supervised by the Civil Rights Division of the voting section of the Civil Rights Division. I also hope that we might be able to pass the Voting Enhancement Act, but right now we have to work with the tools that are given us. And the tools that are given us is that we're going to push legal registration, legal voting, and we're going to provide people the right to vote by mail, and that their ballot will be counted. And I think it is important, as I have noted, just about 10 days ago, the Bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee affirmed with no hesitation the complete report of the 2016 election. There was no doubt that Russians interfered with that election for one candidate, and that was Donald J. Trump. And so I have absolutely no intent to be fooled and turned around by those Russians who were indicted, by the way, by the prosecutors under Director Mueller. I have no intent to go that journey again or to have that story again. It is imperative that we in the Congress and in the House are eagle eye on the intelligence community's presentation to us that there's something going on. I will not be silent through the election. One word of the conspiracy working and being in the midst of bots and social media instigating, the one word coming from my constituents, and I will be on the microphone, the megaphone, so the nation can hear, stop, there's something going on with our elections. And we will have the vetting of election officers and counters and everybody else, because your vote is your voice. And your voice is your vote. Let me say that again. Your vote is your voice, and your voice is your vote. And the power of your voice is your vote.
Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee on this ticket. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, of course, the Democratic National Convention. We always appreciate her. Folks, stay tuned. As I have said, there is movement and action daily around H.R. 40, the remedy bill for reparations, and she is our leader in that regard. So we're going to have a Black woman making history on the ticket, and then we're going to have a Black woman making history for getting H.R. 40 passed, the first reparations bill in the history of the United States, and we appreciate her, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. Thank you so much.
I'm delighted to be with you. And before I end and say bye-bye, let me say that I think this convention that is going to bring together people from all walks of life, all of our caucuses, we represent from Native Americans to Latinx, women, the Black caucus, the LGBTQ, environmental caucus, the military caucus, as I said, indigenous people, Native Americans. We love being the big tent, and this will be our convention. The faith community, we're not turning anyone around. Republicans, come on in. Independents, come on in. This is going to be a celebratory convention, but it's going to be one with resolve and resilience. And frankly, it's going to be Black women, women of color, taken to that mountaintop and bringing everybody on to really help change America. When we change America, we change it not for ourselves, but for our children, and our grandchildren, children's children, our grandchildren, and all the people that have been suffering. And we're going to turn the corner on COVID-19, and we're going to do it with a convention that will then turn into being a new government for this nation. But we can't get it, Reverend, without work. Thank you so very much for having me, and it's been a pleasure to be with you.
We love Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, everyone. We do indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, pleasure to have with us also as we discuss this Democratic National Convention this week from Alabama, and one who really is inheriting the work of John Lewis in Selma. And she's always been a big part of the movement in Selma, the celebrations in Selma, and of late has even shepherded John Lewis's annual visits to Selma, working very closely with the community herself and all the other entities involved to help make Selma a success every year. And actually, the only historical civil rights event that is commemorated annually. And we have her to thank for the important role she has played in that, our dear friend, Congresswoman Terri Sewell. Congresswoman Sewell, how are you?
I am hanging in there, Mark. Everything's great.
That's good. That's good. And excited about this convention, I take it.
I am. I'm very excited about this convention. I think that Joe Biden has shown his good judgment in making his first major decision as a presidential candidate and choosing Senator Kamala Harris. Of course, he had a deep bench, wonderful women, especially African-American women, to choose from. And all of them are incredibly talented and could do the job. But, Kamala is his choice. And, I think that as the highest ranking African-American woman, as this U.S. Senator, she has really shown herself to fight for the voiceless and to fight for the common man. So I'm really excited about her choice. And more importantly, this is day one of the convention. So I'm really excited about the Democratic National Convention going on. And I'm looking forward to participating later today in the Democratic National Convention Women's Caucus. So the Democratic Women's Caucus event with Lottie Shackelford. So I'm looking forward to that.
No, and I know that will be exciting. I understand you and your mother were in the car when you heard about the announcement of Kamala Harris for vice president. Tell us what happened.
I nearly swerved off the road. We were visiting my mom's sister in Lowndes County, Alabama. So we were actually on Highway 80, that infamous journey from Selma to Montgomery, and we were headed back to Selma. And when we heard on the radio the announcement on Sirius on CNN, my mom, who is a life member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, literally started crying. I think that her emotions were so full as an African-American woman herself in politics. My mom has always been my role model. She was actually the first African-American woman to sit on the city council in Selma. So she's a bit of a trailblazer herself. But the fact that we have an African-American woman on the ticket that she's lived to see an African-American president and now an African-American woman vice presidential candidate, she was just overjoyed. Aside from the fact that she is a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority and has been a lifetime member. She's one of those golden sorors. Actually, she's headed towards platinum. She's been 50 years plus in the sorority. So we're excited about that. You know, I think that it's not just about the sisterhood, because it's really more about the Divine Nine. We know how important the African-Americans, the fraternities and sororities are working together hand in glove. They will be a formidable, coalition to get out the vote.
Right. And the Divine Nine, our HBCUs. Now, wait a minute, Congresswoman, your mother's an AK. Did you pledge? Are you Greek?
Absolutely. You know, I'm an Alpha Kappa. I mean, I may be wearing red, but it okay. Really is intensified pink is what you're looking at.
That's what I thought.
In fact, I'm a silver soror. I've been 25 years plus in Alpha Kappa Alpha. And when I arrived at my college, they didn't have a chapter. But needless to say, when I left my college, they had a chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha. I went to Princeton University, and I helped charter the first chapter. It was a city chapter, and really excited about that. So yes, I am. But you know, at the end of the day, this is really about the American people. It's about choosing someone who will be ready day one to take over the presidency. And it's about restoring dignity. As Joe Biden says, we really are trying to redeem the soul of this nation. When I think of how this president has really run our country into the ground, literally. What's at stake on the ballot is not only our livelihoods when we think about the economic crisis that we're in now caused by a public health crisis, but we're also on the ballot is our very lives as African Americans are dying disproportionately from COVID-19. And of course, what is also on our ballot is our democracy, saving our democracy. And nothing was more sacrosanct to John Lewis than the right to vote. He famously said that it was the most powerful nonviolent tool in our democracy. And our vote is at stake as this president is trying to undermine the U.S. Postal Service and at every turn is trying to invalidate vote by mail. So we really have our work cut out, but we have an amazing ticket in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
You know, and I noticed you've been tweeting a lot about the Postal Service. You know, COVID is one thing. Mail-in ballots are one thing. But how many people, I mean, so many people today get their prescriptions through the mail, Congresswoman. So, I mean, how many people are endangered, who you talk about life and death? Like right now at this very moment, I heard General Russell Honore say on television, his prescriptions as a senior citizen have not arrived. So now he has to go to the drugstore and hope he can buy them or pay for them out of pocket or whatever. But the mail service itself, what Trump is doing to that, is endangering people's lives right now.
Absolutely. You know that the VA system sends all of its medicine through the mail. So what we are really, it's not just our senior citizens at risk, but it's also our veterans at risk and not receiving their medicines. Likewise, you know, given this pandemic, more and more of us are being safer at home or ordering things. So the delivery service has been disrupted as well. And so I look forward, Nancy Pelosi has announced, we had a caucus call this morning, that we're coming back from our August recess because House Democrats understand that we must do something now to shore up, to provide resources to the U.S. Postal Service so that they can meet the needs of the American people. And that's everyday needs of the American people as well as ballots.
And this obviously, in terms of the ballots, is the latest form of voter suppression. You know, down through the years has always been, we have to give it to our enemies. They can be very creative when it comes to voter suppression, whether gerrymandering or counting jelly beans in a jar. Now they're just going to shut down the mail. Can you imagine what John Lewis would have said about what's happening to the Postal Service?
Absolutely. It's as if old battles have become new again. While we no longer have to pass a literacy test in order to register to vote, there are modern day forms of voter suppression, gerrymandering, purging of rolls, uh, uh, closing down polling stations without adequate notice. And all of that really stems from the fact that the Shelby versus Holder decision, the Supreme Court gutted the pre-clearance provisions and enforceability provisions of the Voting Rights Act. And in nullifying that, they gave a challenge to Congress to order to fully restore the protections of the Voting Rights Act. We had to come up with a modern day formula to determine which states have had a history of voter discrimination, such that they needed to have every voting law pre-cleared by Congress. And so, look, if I had my druthers, I think voting is so important that every state should have to go through the rigors of federal oversight in changing their voting laws. But we know that that is quite expensive, and it's not within the political will of the Republican Party. But you and I both know that voting rights used to not be a partisan issue. It used to be pretty nonpartisan. In fact, the Voting Rights Act was fully restored, was fully authorized for 25 years back in 2006 under George W. Bush.
Right.
But I think that our Republican colleagues have realized that they can actually change elections by stopping certain people from voting.
Yeah, and making sure that not enough people are voting. I know the speaker even said it appears that the president is afraid of the American people and voting. So that's why you want to minimize. So she has called you all back in to session. Is that correct?
She has, to take up a bill that would provide more additional resources, money, to the United States Postal Service. We currently have a Postmaster General who doesn't know anything about the Postal Service. He's a longtime friend and donor, $1 million donor to Donald Trump. And he's come in and has gotten rid of overtime. And you and I both know that these are frontline essential workers, our postal delivery men and women, who literally working around the clock to make sure, as you said, that our medicine, that our food, so many people are dependent upon their everyday needs being delivered given this COVID pandemic. So we're going to take up a bill. There's going to be a series of hearings that the Oversight Committee will undertake, but we're going to take up a bill, and it looks like we're going to go back on Saturday to vote on that bill. I'm not sure what Mitch McConnell will do. He may do what he has done with 275 other pieces of bipartisan legislation that the House Democrats have passed, including, by the way, the John Robert Lewis Voting Rights Act of 2020, which would help fully restore the Voting Rights Act. Mitch McConnell has literally, and the Senate and the Republicans generally, have shown that they don't really care about the American public. And for the president to think that he can really solve anything with these executive orders, which were pretty meaningless if you think about it. I mean, you can only get pandemic insurance if you're an extra money if your state actually antes up 1/4 of it. So I think that what the American people desperately need is for us to act as a Congress. And if the president won't act and the Republicans won't act, we House Democrats will do our part. We passed 3 months ago, the HEROES Act, to give another round of stimulus checks, to give more money for election protection, to give an election assistance as well, to give more money for nutritional assistance. So many schools are starting back without having adequate PPE, and our HEROES Act would have fully funded all of that. But the Republicans really in the White House refused to act. And so the consequences is that we're going to go back now and pass a bill specifically targeted at funding the U.S. Postal Service and trying to make sure that that all of the shenanigans that this White House is trying to do won't occur for this election.
You mentioned the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Is there any indication of late that Mitch McConnell is going to do anything at all with that bill?
No, there isn't. What really hurt my heart is to listen to Mitch McConnell at one of the honoring ceremonies as John Lewis lay in state in the United States Capitol. He, as a leader of the Republican Party and as the president of the Senate, gave remarks, and he gave such accolades about John, talked about his character and his values. But all of that rings hollow if you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is and actually pass legislation that would fully restore the Voting Rights Act. The legacy, if we want to honor the legacy of John Lewis, then we will honor his life's work, which was voting rights. And we, the people, will do what we can in every election to vote, that whether it's federal, state, or local. And we as legislators can do our part, federal legislators, and pass a bill that would fully restore the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
Indeed, indeed. Back to this convention this week, the Democratic National Convention. Are you confident that this convention is going to inspire most of America to get fully behind this Biden-Harris ticket?
I do. I participated in the events on Sunday night. It was the Black Caucus has a series of events, the Democratic Black Caucus. And on Sunday, it was a ceremony of faith where they had amazing preachers like Otis Moss and others. And there were thousands upon thousands of people who participated in just that event, which was a Black Caucus event, paying tribute to Jesse Jackson, as well as to talk about the importance of our faith, and having such a dynamic turnout just for that event. I know that we are highly motivated. We know that we must vote like our lives depend on it, because it does. And so I look forward to the various events. Unfortunately, the only thing that will be on live streamed on national television will be the 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock hour, or if you're Central Time, the 8 to 10 o'clock hour. But everything will be on our website, the Democratic National Convention website, on various platforms. We're encouraging people to register for various events. I know I'm looking forward to being a delegate this year, as well as my mother. So you'll be seeing the Sewell ladies wear our Biden-Harris t-shirts. Be on the lookout for our tweets on my campaign page as we show off our pledge, our dedication to the Biden-Harris team by wearing our shirts and really getting into the festive mode. This is obviously unprecedented times we're living in, which is requiring us to do things unprecedentedly, including holding this Democratic convention, all of our conventions. And so, I know that Joe Biden is modeling the behavior that he wants us to have. He wants us to be safer at home. He knows that. And he also knows that that African Americans and a lot of vulnerable communities are disproportionately represented in COVID-19 and the cases and in the deaths. And so he is trying to be the responsible adult in the room by wearing his mask, as you see him in all the public events, as well as encouraging us to stay at home, but stay engaged. So we're doing it the old-fashioned way. We're phone banking, calling up folks. We're now doing it Zoom, virtual watch parties, and the like. So I'm getting excited about this, and I know that as a delegate from Alabama, my mom and I are all ready with our schedule of Zoom events that we're going to participate in.
That's great. That's great. Lastly, the selection of Kamala Harris, isn't that also a very timely acknowledgement of the historical role that Black women have always played as the backbone of the Democratic Party?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know that firsthand, that African-American women can make a difference. We turned a ruby red state of Alabama blue in the election of Senator Doug Jones. It was the African-American women's vote, 98%, and the African-American men vote, 95%, that really catapulted him to victory. And so I think that it is truly timely that Joe Biden would choose a woman, but not only a woman, but an African-American woman, highly qualified. Let's be clear, Mark, Kamala could be at the top of the ticket. She is ready day one to lead. She has shown herself to be fully capable in both foreign policy, sits on the Senate Intel Committee. I sit on the House Intel Committee. We've done numerous joint things together in that front. She's also well qualified to fight for justice. She's shown herself to be an advocate on behalf of the least of these and the voiceless. And I know that she will do that in her role as the vice president. And so, I think that it is truly timely that the Democratic Party acknowledges the role of the African-American women as the most reliable voting bloc for the Democratic Party. And so this is not only is Kamala qualified regardless of race and gender, but it's a sweet icing on the cake that we get such an acknowledgement of our strength in that voting bloc for the Democratic Party.
Of course, since you mentioned Doug Jones in your own home state, how's it looking for him? Can we keep him in office?
We can if we go out, that same coalition that actually put him over the top the first time. And that's, he's going to have to continue to siphon off independents and those suburban white women who are Republican voters normally. And I think he can. I mean, look, I think that Donald Trump has only doubled down in his offense, in being both racist and misogynistic. He has doubled down in his efforts to be, to not deserve to get the vote from white women, suburban women. So much is at stake on this election, and I believe that Doug Jones will pull it out as he's pulled it out before.
Congresswoman Terri Sewell, thank you for speaking with us today. Congratulations on the convention and you and your mom being delegates. And thank you for your faithfulness, we all know, to John Lewis. You were a very faithful friend to him and his legacy. And I know personally how much he adored you. So
we all have to keep up his memory, right? We've got to do what we can. I think that for me, growing up in Selma, Alabama, and a life member of Brown Chapel AME Church, I've seen him time and time again to grow up and have as your personal hero your colleague. I mean, only in America could a little Black girl dream of being in office. And one day, I couldn't have in my wildest dreams ever thought that I would be the first African-American woman to represent the state of Alabama in Congress. And I know it's because of John Lewis and Amelia Boynton and all of those foot soldiers that had the audacity to make this nation live up to its ideals. It's up to all of us, Mark, and I know you're going to do your part. I want all of us to do our part to continue John's legacy. That's remembering to vote in every election, up and down the ballot. It is critically important that we vote in every election, federal, state, and local. And nothing is more critical at this time than voting in the presidential election and voting for the Biden-Harris ticket. It will be a ticket, it's a dream ticket, and it will be the ticket that will help restore not only the soul of America, but the dignity, integrity, exceptionalism that is America.
Indeed. Congresswoman Terri Sewell, we thank you, okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
God, you are our refuge. Send our ancestors to guard our doors. Cast out this virus from our communities and our bodies. Heal, bless, and protect everyone listening and their loved ones. Thank you for listening to Make It Plain and Get Woke. Remember to listen, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain.